So I thought long and hard about what I was going to say when I got up here. I was like, okay, has to be perfect. I have 20 minutes of time. I'm going to give this compelling story. I'm going to move hearts. I'm going to make you cry. And I'm going to make you think I'm this incredible person. And then the imposter syndrome set in. And the more I thought, the more I convinced myself out of this talk. The more I thought, the more I said, you know what, I can't do it. That's it. No, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to no, I can't make it to Montreal this weekend. You know, COVID, something like that. And I was going to try to find a way out of this. And the more I had these thoughts, the more I thought, you know, who am I to be sharing my story? I'm not good enough. You know, I don't have this amazing story. I don't have a PhD. I'm not an academic or a doctor or somebody who has all of this knowledge in this field. And then even more than that, I said, who am I to be talking about queer experiences? Am I queer enough to be talking about this in the first place? And then I realized that is exactly the kind of thinking that led me to want to talk to you in the first place. Is this idea that you need to be some level of perfect in order to share your experiences. That you need to be this, you know, in the community we call it this gold star gay in order to be able to talk about the community and the problems that we face. And so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So I hopped on the bus and I took an 8-hour train ride and here I am. So thank you so much, and I'm very, very excited to be here. So as previously mentioned, my name is Katlyn Kotila. I'm 22 years old, and I am in my final year at Laurentian University studying political science. And I'm also president of Fiat Sudbury Pride. Now, for those of you who may not know anything about Sudbury, we're an incredibly bilingual city for the most part, here or there. And so my organization is bilingual. That's why we have Pride, Sudbury Pride. So I want to just pose a question to all of you first. How many of you, if I were to give you a map right now, I know we have people from all across Canada, some people outside of Canada, how many of you could point on a map where Sudbury is right now? You know what, that's actually more than I thought, not gonna lie. That's pretty good. So for those who don't know where Sudbury is, does everyone know where Toronto is? Is that a pretty central location? Okay. So usually what I say is Sudbury's about 4.5 hours, give or take, north of Toronto. And the thing about Sudbury is you really don't have very much queer representation. I've lived in Sudbury my entire life. I'm born and raised, and I haven't really left yet. And growing up, I really couldn't tell you a single person in my community and in my immediate circle that I knew that was a part of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. I couldn't tell you a queer person. I couldn't tell you a role model I could look up to. And that was incredibly isolating. Because when you are growing up, and you're growing up queer, not only do you have the stigma, not only do you have this idea that, you know, you're going to hell and you're gonna burn and that's it, but now you have no one to look up to. You have no one that you can look to that is going through the experiences that you're going through and is facing the challenges you're facing. And while I love, you know, my straight friends, they're not gonna have that same experience. They're not gonna know how to support. And so growing up in Sudbury was an incredibly isolating experience for me. I knew that I was gay at a very young age. I would definitely in elementary school. Can't give you exact age, but elementary school. And I remember, you know, just feeling like I was the only person in the room who felt this experience. And then somebody in the grade above me came out as bisexual. And everyone in our school, everyone in the surrounding community, that person was the talk of the town. And that person was being gossiped about behind their back by every single person. Now imagine knowing that you are feeling the same way and you have to sit there and listen to your friends, your family, the people you care about who are supposed to care about you, talking shit about this person, talking about how it's an abomination, how, why don't they just choose? Imagine hearing that, and in your mind, you're now thinking, I feel that way. So if you feel that way about this person, how do you feel about me? You're supposed to love me, but if you feel that about this person, what about me? Are you not going to love me? And so imagine the fear that you feel when the closest people, the people who are supposed to love you, are saying that. And so I stayed closeted for a very long time. And so in elementary school, I knew I was gay. In elementary school was the very first time I also felt feelings of suicidal thoughts. That was the first time that I started getting these thoughts that said, you know what, maybe life just isn't for me. This is something I'd rather not live. And, some people could call that a coincidence, but I'm pretty sure they're correlated. Considering that queer individuals, transgender individuals, two-spirit individuals, the whole community is at a greater risk of suicide. And so if I'm looking at my experience and I'm knowing that I knew that I was queer, and only about a year later, I started having thoughts, suicidal thoughts, they have to be related. And so that happened in elementary school, and then I went on to high school, and I was like, you know what, I'm alive thus far, we're gonna see how this all goes. I'm still very closeted. And then at the young age of 14, I lost a very close friend to suicide. And the first thing I could just think of is that was supposed to be me, because I didn't think that I was going to even live to see high school. And so when I lose my friend that close, someone I love, someone who had such a bright future, I couldn't help but just feel guilt. I felt guilty for being alive when they were no longer alive. Now, that wasn't the initial feeling. I will be honest about that. I don't know if anyone here has lost someone, but as you are familiar with the stages of grief, my first stage of grief was denial. And when I found out that I had lost my friend to suicide, I acted as if it didn't affect me. I acted as if, oh yeah, I'm fine. People would ask me, are you okay? Like, are you sure you're okay? Like, this must be affecting you. Are you sure? And I would say, yeah, no, we were close, but, we weren't that close. And then it eventually hit me. The day of her funeral, I'm getting ready for the funeral, and I'm in the shower. And when a feeling just hits you like a ton of bricks, like you're standing there and it just goes, alrighty, let's go, we're gonna hit you, we're gonna run you over like a train. Yeah, that's how it felt. And I'm standing there, I'm getting ready for her funeral, and something just snapped, and I start bawling. I'm in the shower, the water's running, and I just can't control myself. I'm bawling, I'm crying, because it finally hit me that somebody I cared about was no longer going to be here. And, losing someone to suicide is a very complex feeling. I don't know how many of you have lost someone close to you to suicide, but for those of you who have, you know that there's a certain level of guilt and a different complex grief beyond regular grief. And going through that experience was something that took a very long time for me to deal with. It took a very, very long time. And not only was I dealing with loss from suicide, but I was dealing with my own problems. I was dealing with my own mental illness and my own suicidal thoughts. And on top of that, I was dealing with the complex issues that come with being queer. And so I'm going to come over here. I did write down some statistics because I have a horrible memory, and I wanted to make sure I got this right, because I think this is too important for me to get wrong. So when we talk about suicide, and we talk about the queer community and the 2S LGBTQ+ community, 2S LGBTQ+ youth are 14 times more at risk of suicide than their cisgender straight peers. And I want to emphasize that. 14 times more. That's incredible amounts. Recent studies have shown that 45% of US LGBTQ+ youth have seriously considered suicide in the past year. And, a lot of people don't understand that there are feelings and experiences and things that come with being a part of this community that, nobody's addressing. Not really. US LGBTQ+ youth are especially vulnerable to mental health concerns. They face increased risk of physical and sexual exploitation, substance abuse, and suicide. And so when we talk about the suicide crisis and we talk about these experiences with suicide, I want to remind you, and that's what I'm here today, that we need to talk about suicide intersectionally. We need to talk about how each person's individual experiences, each person's identity is going to affect their mental health and is going to affect their increased risk of suicide. When we talk about helping the suicide crisis, we need to make sure that we have supports in place that are going to be affirming, that we recognize that discrimination and stigma and all of the things that come along with being queer and a part of the US LGBTQ+ community is going to have a negative effect on mental health. And in order to address it, we need to have solutions in place that are unique to these communities and that serve these communities. And even more so, we need to recognize that one person's identity is not just going to be one identity in a silo. And so my identity as being queer, great, fantastic. I'm also a woman. I'm also from Northern Ontario, and so my lack of resources is very high, I don't have access to very many resources, very many queer affirming spaces, very many, role models, people I can look up to. And all of those things are going to have an impact on my experiences and who I am. As I said, I knew very young that I was a part of this community, but I had nobody to look up to. And it wasn't until I actually joined our local Pride organization and I met people who had similar experiences to me that I started to realize that, I'm not alone in this feeling. I'm not alone in this community, that we actually have quite a thriving queer community here in Sudbury that I just didn't even know about. And it's because nobody took the time or nobody knew to tell me about it. I had to find that on my own, and I didn't find it until I was 19 years old, right? And so I wanted to title this talk, Fostering Pride Among Youth Will Help to Save Lives. And it's because I truly think that that is a great place to start. As I said, I didn't know that we had a thriving queer community in Sudbury until I was 19 years old. I didn't think I was going to make it to see the end of high school. I didn't think I was going to make it to see high school. Had I had these services in place when I was young, had I known that this community was there and that I had supports that understood what I was going through, I may have suffered a lot less, right? That suffering may not have been there. And, I'm lucky to be here today, but a lot of my friends, they're not. They didn't get to see graduation. They didn't get to see, 22 and beyond. And it's because we haven't done a good job at making sure that care is accessible to people and care is going to actually be effective for people and going to be reaffirming for people. I work a lot with the community now that I'm president of Fiat Sudbury Pride, and one of the big things that comes up time and time again is that while there are healthcare providers out there, there are mental health care providers out there, there are not gender-affirming and sexuality-affirming healthcare providers out there. And so a lot of queer and trans people will go to these providers seeking help. They will take that step that we talk about to go and reach out for that help, and the help won't know how to help them. They look at them and say, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do for you. Or even worse, they won't recognize that there's a difference that's needed and cause more harm. And that was something that I actually, when I first decided, I'm really struggling right now, it's time for me to reach out to help, I experienced. And don't get me wrong, my counselors and everyone that I've seen have been wonderful people. And I'm very grateful for everything that Go to this mic? Okay. That's okay, I don't mind. I'm gonna
try and find it.
No worries. Anyways, as I was saying, so I reached out for help, and while they were fantastic, they didn't quite know what to say. When I talked about how, because I identify as queer, and I have been in relationships with men, I've been in relationships with women, it's many different types of relationships. But when I went to my therapist and said, I'm really struggling right now. I'm in a relationship and I think I'm a lesbian. I said, I've identified as queer, I've identified as bisexual, there's been a number of labels that I've put on myself, but I truly think I'm a lesbian. My therapist looked at me and he said, I don't know how to help you, I'm sorry, maybe, you could be. But didn't know the right questions to ask to help me through that process. And I was really struggling because this is someone I cared about. This was a relationship I cared about. And I didn't want to see it end just because I had some of those thoughts. But he didn't know what to say because we're not actually training healthcare providers. We're not actually training people on how to properly address these issues and to properly care for these people. Similarly, when trans folks go reach out to healthcare and they ask for help, oftentimes not only are they made fun of, but they're put in situations in which they're dead named, in which they are put in really compromising situations that are not going to be gender affirming and going to be incredibly harmful to them, harmful to their mental health, and it's going to make them less likely to want to reach out for help. And when we make situations in which people are less likely to reach out for help, we increase the risk of suicide. When we create spaces in which queer folks don't feel safe to be in, they don't feel safe to be who they truly are, we increase that risk. I'm very lucky that I have had a fantastic queer community behind me. And while at times my family and my support system have not always been the most wonderful and understanding, I've always had the queer community behind me. But not everyone has that. And not everyone has a space in which they can feel safe. And so what you will see is people will hide who they are. They will stay in that closet, they will hide within themselves because they don't feel that they can be their true authentic selves. And so this is another statistic I want to bring to you. And this statistic says that even though LGBTQ+ youth are 14 times more at risk of suicide, that risk decreases by 93% when they have strong family support. 93% it decreases. Just take that in for a second. Think about how important it can be for a support system and for people, for queer people, especially queer youth, who are going through it, to have a support system that they can turn to and have people that are going to tell them, you know what, I accept you for who you are, and I'm going to support you, and I'm going to make sure you get care that is going to be good for you. Imagine how many lives we can save if we made sure that every single youth had a supportive system in place. And I understand that families are going to be dysfunctional at times. And I understand that family is not always a support system we can count on. But that's why, as the system that we're calling ourselves, it's our responsibility to create those support systems and to put that support in place. Because while families may not always be there for the youth, we can. We can make sure that we have services available that are going to understand the compounded discrimination and compounded issues that queer youth are facing. And we can make sure we're creating spaces in which we are encouraging people to be their true, authentic self. And we, all of us, every single person in this room, if we do that, if we take that one simple step to make sure that the spaces we're creating are inclusive and that the spaces we're creating are going to be affirming and are going to not cause further harm, every single one of us can save a life. And we can save many lives in that. And so if you're taking anything from this today, I do hope you take that it is each and every person in this room's responsibility to make sure that we are creating safe and inclusive spaces. And if we do that, we can save lives. So that's, what I'm asking you to do today. And I know that some of you may not quite understand what it's like to to feel those feelings of not fitting in, of having to face the stigma, the discrimination, and everything that goes along with being a part of this community. And so in order for you to kind of understand, I do want to give you this. And I want to give you what I would have said to myself, 13, 14-year-old Katlyn, who just lost her close friend to suicide, who didn't think she'd make it to high school, who's thinking of ending her life. And so what I would say is that there are people who care. I would say that there are going to be people who are going to be awful, but there are a ton of people who do care. There are people who know what you are going through and who are going to be with you every step of the way. And for me, that's been Sudbury Pride, and I'm so thankful for that. But also I want to say that this is a system that's not built for us yet. It's a system that ultimately has been built for white people, for straight people, for cis people, and for men. It's a system that is discriminatory in nature. It's a system that is always going to be built on that foundation unless we take steps to tear it apart. And I would say to my younger self that despite the fact that the system is rigged against us, it's going to be okay. Because eventually, I have hope that things are going to get better. I have hope that the more people who have courage to live their authentic selves, the more people who have courage to go against the status quo, who have the courage to fight against what this oppressive system currently is, they're going to help to change it. And one day there's going to be a system in place that's completely different from this one that is going to have culturally relevant care, one that's going to have care that's going to be inclusive and supportive and encouraging and empowering. And hopefully one day there's going to be a system and there's going to be a society in which no one has to be left behind from suicide, in which no one has to lose their life to suicide. What I would say to my younger self is that it's going to be okay. And it's going to take a village and a community, and it's going to take each and every one of us making sure that we're stepping up in this community to make our community safe for everyone. But one day, I have hope, current Katlyn has hope, that that dream of mine, that dream that some people may not see as being a reality, I have hope it will be. I have hope that one day everyone can live to thrive and not just to survive. And so that's my hope, that's what I would say, and that's what I want to leave you with. And I am grateful that all of you are here because it means that you're taking steps towards creating this dream. And that is promising and that is encouraging. And I know that if there's anyone here who may have feelings of their own that they're questioning, who may not necessarily understand their identity, I hope that you leave here with hope and knowing that one day there will be a safe space for you to come out even if you don't feel like you can right now. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. And I do want to say one more thing before I go, and that is, first of all, you can find me on social media, all that fun stuff. But also, too, if you so feel inclined, donate to your local Pride organization. Do it today, do it tomorrow. But that's also kind of my goal for you, is make sure that in supporting these spaces, we're financially supporting these spaces too, so that we can have physical spaces for queer people to congregate, to gather, to feel included, and that these organizations can stay afloat, because a lot of us aren't. A lot of us are fighting for grant funding and for donations, and so if you have the financial means to do so, please donate, because you can save lives just by doing that. Thank you.
That's good.